Welcome, everybody, to the first Eden Stories of the season, first of four. Uh, we're pleased to have Ali and Stephen with me today, talking about invasives and stop the spread. Um, so they're going to be doing 20-minute talks between them. And the format of today is I'll do a quick introduction just to explain who's funding this project and these webinars. It's part of our Access to Eden project that we're able to produce these and put these out. The ethos being to get people out into the Eden catchment and explore. And so online exploring is as valid as getting out there and seeing it for yourself. So we've put these webinars together. Um, I'm really going to take a few minutes just to talk through the project, um, what it's doing in the Eden catchment, 2 minutes of your time, and then we'll get on to the main event. Ali is going to talk about some of the invasives work we're doing with balsam and stop the spread. And then we'll go to Stephen to do a 20 minutes or so on the reintroduction of water voles. And then at the end, we'll do a Q&A session. So as we go through, if you've got any questions, you'll find a Q&A button on your Zoom feed there. And you can use that to type questions in as we go. So we'll pick those up towards the end if there's anything that hasn't been answered in the presentations that are being given. So we think a few minutes from me, 20 minutes from Ali, 20 minutes from Stephen, and then we'll cover some of your questions and then wrap up before 4. That's the plan, if all goes to plan and it all works as it should do. So to get things underway, a little bit about our project. You'll see the mapping here of the Eden River catchment, which is where we're based. What we have is a project which is funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, a 4-year project. We're halfway through, spanning the Eden River catchment, supported and in partnership with organisations like Cumbria Wildlife Trust, North Pennines National Landscapes, Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority, and lots more. And the aim of the project and the strapline really is breaking barriers and building bridges. So we're actually trying to provide people that live in the area or visit the area with more opportunities to get out and explore the Eden Valley through various schemes that we're running, and with concentration on 8 specific sites in the Eden catchment where we're doing extra work, who will benefit directly from the funding from the lottery. So at these sites, we're going to be improving accessibility, diversity of wildlife and plant life, providing more volunteer opportunities and events at these sites. So engine lolling up the top there towards Carlisle city centre site. We're putting in an accessible pathway and some interpretation and sculpting going in there. We have a community tree nursery in Penrith, providing opportunities for volunteers and a safe space for people to come and meet during the week. So that's run every week. Tree planting across the catchment, a bit of rewiggling going on with our rivers, and addressing some more catchment-wide issues, which is really what today's talk is about in terms of invasive species and species reintroduction. So big aims for the project. We have another 2 years to go and it's on track. So we're hoping for bigger and better things in the final 2 years. So I'm going to pass over to Ali. So do remember to type questions in if you have anything that you want answering towards the end, and we'll do what we can to do our best to answer them at the end of the talks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. So yeah, I'm going to start us off today looking at stopping the spread and the action against invasive projects that we're carrying out in the Eden Valley here. And a bit of a background to kind of Himalayan balsam as a case study and Oldswater as well, looking at the two sides of invasives in the catchment. Next slide, please, Chris. So yeah, just a brief overview for anyone that doesn't know what an invasive non-native species is. So yeah, back when the UK separated from mainland Europe as an island, any species that was left on the mainland left on the UK as the island is classed as a native species. Um, any that have since come across, either by travelers going away and picking species up and bringing them back, or by natural migration, any that have come across since then, we class as non-native species. And there's around 2,000 that are established in the UK. Around 3,000 have been brought over in total. And out of those 2,000 that are established, around 15% become invasive. So this is when they have characteristics that make them outcompete some of our native species and then dominate habitats in the UK. And out of that 15%, there's then around 58% that are freshwater invasives, and these are the ones we're most concerned about. And they're very easy to establish, and they're very they make the freshwater systems very vulnerable with these invasives coming in. Next slide, please, Chris. So, in a very general kind of terms, starting us off, why are they a problem for our lakes and rivers here, but also in kind of the UK as a whole? They are classed as one of the top five drivers for biodiversity loss worldwide. So that's kind of included in habitat loss, habitat fragmentation, land use change, and climate change. So they're one of those top five, and they harm the wildlife, the environment. They can cost the economy, up to 2 billion a year, and this is through different means, whether that's impacting industry or other factors. But they can also impact our health and way of life, especially up here when you look at the Lake District and all the visitors that are coming in. So yeah, a lot of their issues are irreversible once they're here. So a big factor for us is to stop them before they even enter our area or the UK in general. Next slide, please, Chris. So when we look at invasives, there's a couple of steps that we can go through, and these, as you go down the list, there increase in costs and time. So starting at the very top is where we all want to start. So thinking about IDing what's around, keeping an eye out, monitoring if there are things that are coming, but just looking around close by you, your neighbouring counties and neighbouring areas. Then you drop down to the prevention. So if we can stop species coming in the first place, then a lot of that cost and the time we won't have to think about. So we're preventing any that are close by from coming in, and we'll run through a few kind of ways that we go about that later on in the talk. If any do come into the area, we want to have early detection and rapid response, so we can find where they are, and we've got people that can deal with them, and we can get rid of them as quickly as possible before they establish. And the last on the list down there is the ones that have been around for a while and we probably all know of. And it's looking at the long-term management. How do we get rid of these? And how do we do it sustainably and in the most effective way to get rid of them for the future? Next slide, please, Chris. So I've put a couple on here that we're concerned about in the Eden Valley, and these are the ones that are most common. So you probably will recognize the Himalayan balsam, the Japanese knotweed, and the giant hogweed. These are across the UK as well, so they're not just limited to our catchment. And then down the bottom there, you've got a couple. So the American skunk cabbage is mostly found in some of the bigger estates and in the gardens of some of these big stately homes. And the Canadian and Nuttall's waterweed can be found now in Ullswater as well. And kind of you'll find that in bigger ponds and water bodies. So these are some of the ones we're most concerned about and that we're kind of taking action to in the Eden Valley. And a lot of characteristics are similar with all these species. So they might have high reproductive rates. They can disperse huge amounts of seeds that will go miles and miles and can be transported in various different ways. Or they might just be very hardy to get rid of. So ones that are in the ground, the roots that you have to spend years and years of treatments to get rid of. So they've all got these characteristics that make them very successful invasives. and you do start to admire how successful they actually are when you spend more time around them. Next slide, please, Chris. So starting off, I thought I'd just go into a bit more detail with Himalayan balsam. So it's one that we have been working on for quite a while now. Most people know or will recognize this plant, even if they don't know what it was before. And it's mostly found along the rivers and becks because it can transport so well via water or via wind. So a lot of our becks are lined with this at the sides, and it's one that we're very concerned about. Um, so yeah, characteristics similar to before. So this one can throw out up to 800 seeds per plant, and these will get flung in all directions, kind of 5 to 7 meters away from where that plant is. So within a couple of years, you can really see kind of the dominance that this plant would have and forming the kind of monocultures where there are no other plants. This one will just dominate. It's got a very quick germination rate, so it comes up earlier than some of our native plants, which then pollinators will go into this one first and favor it over our native ones. So that's how it can kind of start that competition stage to reduce the native plants there because they're not getting that same pollination. Um, but it is easy for us to deal with, luckily compared to some of the others. So it's really hollow. It's got a shallow root system. So what we can do is pull it out and bash it. And it's an activity that we've been carrying on for the past couple of years and really expanding within the trust here. Next slide, please, Chris. So the power of people, I think that says it all. We wouldn't be able to do any of this without the people that are that live in the Eden Valley or have come and volunteered with us. So yeah, this infographic here was created from last year's Balsams program, and it was our groundbreaking year for balsam bashing across the Eden. Um, and the biggest stat up the top there on the infographic down the bottom is the 120 million seeds prevented from germinating in 2026. And this is a very approximate number, but we worked it out from doing little challenges with groups that we had out of how many plants we might have pulled in a day and then scaling it up. But it really kind of proves that people can make a difference and many hands make light work. So we want to just keep that momentum building with the people out in the catchment. So that's been kind of a mix of different groups, scout group, cub groups that we've had involved. And the quote down the bottom is from Carlisle, which I just love. So I show it to everyone that balsam bashing is more addictive than vaping. I think that's powerful, and yeah. So we need to get some more young people involved in pulling balsam out in the future. Next slide, please, Chris. So yeah, alongside the taking action on the ground, the easiest way for people to get involved is by recording it out there, and it really helps us to focus our efforts each summer if we can look at where people have been recording balsam in the past and kind of the momentum we've been building there. So at the start of our project 2 years ago, there was only 21 records on Insmapper, which is available out there for anyone to download. And yeah, now it's up to about 390 there, and 240 of these were in 2025 alone. So we've made real progress. And when you look on the map there, it's quite small, but you can start to see the shape of the River Eden through records and also around Ullswater. We've got quite a dense population of records on there. But this is with volunteers. We've collaborated with the Angling Trust, who are out on the ground all the time. So yeah, lots of really useful information coming in and to inform us for future years. Next slide, please. So yeah, just touching on Ullswater then as a kind of link to the balsam side to start with. So Ullswater is part of the Lake District National Park, which we kind of link into as well. And I was approached by a local group there who'd been recording balsam bashes for the past 20 years. And they've pretty much got to a point where they've fully eradicated it from that subcatchment, which is incredible. But they had paper maps and copies of things that they wanted to then upload so they had longevity for the future and that the data could be used again. Um, so we helped them upload onto InsMapper here. And when you look on the map, if anyone who's listening knows Ullswater, a lot of where these data points are recorded are also where hotspots are for recreation in the summer. So there's a direct correlation there between people coming and using the lake and also then the spread and the data recorded of invasives around Ullswater. We've also got down there some previous management of knotweed, which we can then see is returning using this app. And yeah, we can then from data recorded on there kind of see where the biosecurity challenges and hotspots are that we can go visit and start that process there. So yeah, we'll kind of move on to Ullswater now as a bit of a case study to see how we're working in there. Next slide, please, Chris. So yeah, a slightly different tact as Ullswater, and this is I mean in the middle. It's known for its water sports, so paddleboarding and canoeing and kayaking, which is great fun. And you can see the stat down the bottom there of so many people visiting the lakes. We now have huge pressures for people getting on the water and enjoying the water. But there's a few species around the outside that we're concerned of, and these are going to be in the lake underneath. And we're worried about them coming, being transported on kayaks and paddleboards, and then infiltrating the lake and taking over. So we've got a couple on there. Some are closer than others. Some are in neighbouring counties. So they're not far away. We have been starting to work to raise awareness and let people know that they're there, and so they can maybe ID them and put measures in place to protect Ullswater against an invasion. Next slide, please. So why does it matter for Ullswater then? So quite similarly to some of the other invasives that we find in the Eden that are here already, these ones will impact the environment firstly. So you're looking at biodiversity loss. They'll outcompete some of the species that we do find in Ullswater and some of the other lakes. And they can just decimate this. So you'll see that they take over, they alter food chains and the habitat structure there. But a lot of these plants, like the one in the picture there, which is floating pennywort, will completely swarm over the top of the water as well. So floating pennywort can grow up to 20 centimeters a day. So you can imagine how quickly that can take over a small pond or water body. So these will block sunlight, reduce oxygen getting into the water below, and alter the nutrient content, again affecting what species you might find in there. And again, with this kind of blocking, they can increase flood risk. So within the water, but also on the bank, if they die back and they're the only species there, they'll leave the banks bare. So you've got risk of erosion and increased flood risk downstream. So they bring a whole host of environmental impacts alongside some other ones. Next slide, please, Chris. And some of these other ones are here as well. So the top one there is mostly linked to our lakes and Ullswater. So they'll block access, make it difficult to actually get in the water, but also limit kind of the safe sections. So where we can go, if they've taken over the edge and you've got thick mats, you're unable to reach the water to actually do recreation. So this is quite a big issue for some of the lakes that we haven't quite thought about. There's health concerns linked to some of these invasives, and they can spur on other issues with the lakes that can also lead to that. And you've got the economic impact, which is a big one here. So increased maintenance costs. If you're speaking about some of the mussel species that can block pipes and take over those, these can cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions, each year to infrastructure. Next slide, please. And just touching on this kind of the cost of doing nothing. If we didn't do anything and we not let them, but these invasives turned up without us realizing, it won't take long before we're getting into some real issues and the lake will be changed forever. So this little example is from Lake Geneva. So yeah, back in 2016, quagga mussels, which are very similar to the zebra mussels, were first detected. And 8 years, 6 years later, by 2022, it spread rapidly. Um, so a couple of surveys were taken kind of in 2022, and I think 80% of what they were surveying, what came back was quaggas, and by 2024, it was just exclusively quagga mussels there. So they've cost the economy there billions. The airport, they're now affecting the pipes that's taking water out of the lake for the airport, so going into cooling systems. To the university, there's a lot of money getting used up because of these quaggas. So they're saying that this lake is unsavable now, which is quite worrying. And it's something that could definitely impact on our lakes up here, with them just in neighbouring counties. So yeah, we definitely need to think about it, and there's a few processes we can do at home that can help out and just protect the lakes from any invasions. Next slide, please, Chris. So what have we been doing? For the past 2 years, we've been running an invasive roadshow. So we've been going down to the lake in the summer holidays, where we've been setting up at some of the hotspots, so the car parks and campsites, and just raising awareness of invasive species in general and how everyone can help out and make a difference when they're enjoying the lake. And this has been really successful with landowners and the businesses down there, but also the tourists that have been coming have been really interested to find out more. Next slide, please, Chris. And alongside that, we have been running our kind of Don't Pack a Pest campaign. So this was launched this year, and this has been working with the two other rivers trusts within the Lake District National Park to see what works out there. How do we contact people coming in? How do we get information to people before they arrive in the area? Which is quite a unique campaign, which has been so this involved making stickers and leaflets and but also running a social media campaign to reach those people who might be driving 2 hours up the road. So we've been trying to put videos out there so they see this before they arrive at Ullswater and have a better idea of how to protect the lake. So this has been really successful, and we're hoping to move this on alongside some of the other engagement and biosecurity sides of the project too. Next slide, please. And this is all linked to biosecurity and the pathways. So yeah, looking at this national campaign of the Check Clean Dry campaign. So we're looking at how do we reduce the risk of introducing a new species into an area, and how are they going to get here? So what are the pathways? How do we recognize where they are and kind of target our information to those areas? So we're catching people on their way into the Lake District. But they can be really hard to spot and really easy to spread on your damp equipment and clothing. So yeah, it's been really vigilant to know how to protect against this. Next slide, please, Chris. So I just chucked a few photos in here as examples of where things might get caught. So yeah, it's all the little hard to reach areas, the bungees, the shoes, the swim floats. These are pockets that might just grab a little bit of weed. And even though in some of these pictures there seems like a lot there, but you only need about 2 centimeters of New Zealand pygmy weed to start a new invasion. So really, it's the tiny little fragments that we're looking for as well on all these bits of gear. Next slide, please. And the next stage is cleaning. So again, it's easy to have a bottle of water. All you need is a squeezy bottle. You could have a brush attached to the end, but it could just be water. And what you want to do is just rinse off all those areas that you've just checked, just in case there are any tiny little bits of plant. You want to make sure those are cleaned off. If you can use hot water, that's brilliant, but it's not always easy to get hot water by the side of a lake. So any bottle you've got in the car is better than nothing. Next slide, please, Chris. And then probably the most important stage is drying all your kit. So some of these invasives can hide in cracks in your folded paddleboard or on a wet piece of wetsuit, and they can stay there for up to 2 weeks. So what we say is dry for at least 48 hours, just in a warm, dry area, and make sure that it's completely dry before you go into another water body. If you're going into another one within that 48 hours, just try and have a separate piece of kit that you then take to that water body instead. Next slide, please, Chris. And just to kind of round out how you can get involved, so I've touched on some of these before. So you've got the INS mapper there, or you can also use iRecord. So they're both apps that you can have on your phone or you can use online, that are really easy to take a picture, upload onto there, and then we can all kind of look at that data and figure out where we can use our resources. If you do have a garden, you can have a look on the Bee Plant Wise website there. Join a local action group and community group in your area. The best thing you can get out and help with a bit of balsam bashing. So there'll definitely be somewhere in your area that you can help out. And the last point there, which is linked to the canoe over the head, which I quite like, that we are a bit at a tipping point here. It can go either way, but if we act now, we can definitely shift the balance to protect these water bodies going forward.
Thanks, Ali. That's grand. We've had a few questions, so thanks for those. We'll cover those together with any that get raised during Stephen's talk at the end in a Q&A session. So without further ado, we will introduce Stephen Henderson, our conservation manager here at Eden Rivers Trust. And he's going to talk a little bit about native species recovery, what the phrase means, what we're doing here at ERT in our patch, and following up the case study on our reintroduction of water voles. And alongside that is the management of American mink in the area. They're predators. So I'll hand over to Stephen to give us the lowdown on that and mute the mic. So all yours.
Thank you, Chris. And thanks for that, Ali. So yeah, today I'm going to just be discussing native species recovery, what that entails, and how we've been involved in this actively from the ground up. We're going to be discussing particularly water vole recovery and the impacts non-native predators such as American mink can have on that, and how by sort of removing these individuals, American mink from populations across the Eden, that we can hopefully facilitate wildlife recovery, not only for water voles, but also for a variety of taxa such as ground nesting birds, waders, crayfish, and fish. So yeah, it's going to be sort of touching on areas like that and what we're doing on the ground to make that happen. Next slide, please, Chris. So I thought I'd briefly touch on some of the ongoing species projects here at Eden Rivers Trust. So firstly is the Eden Catchment Watervole project, which we're going to be discussing a little bit more in depth in this presentation. We also do a white claw crayfish eDNA project, which is using eDNA techniques, such as sampling the watercourse to detect traces of eDNA for white claw crayfish in areas across the catchment, mapping that and doing habitat improvement works to improve the condition of arc sites. These are areas that are of high quality for white claw crayfish and also are separated by barriers such as waterfalls where non-native crayfish can't enter those systems and spread crayfish plague. So it's really important for us to identify these areas and make sure they are of high quality and condition. We're recently finishing up a FIPL, which is Farming in Protected Landscapes project surrounding eDNA. So we've walked over 65 kilometers of the North Pennines National Landscape and sampled water courses in this area to see if we could detect traces of American mink DNA, water vole DNA, and white claw crayfish DNA, just to map where these populations might be and identify habitat improvements that we might be able to do on site, which involved working with farmers and building relationships and contacts through that. And we hope in the future we can act on freshwater pearl mussels as well and see if we can find ways to address non-native invasive crayfish in the catchment. Next slide, please, Chris. So native species recovery is a term that's been sort of used quite a lot in terms of sort of addressing biodiversity losses, and it involves various things. I've just listed a few on the screen there. So whether or not that be species reintroduction, so bringing species that were once part of the landscape back into areas and regions, whether or not it's the monitoring and surveying of taxa whose populations might be declining across the UK. And all really stems on community engagement, partnership working, and hopefully facilitating policy change and maybe even legislation as well to help protect these species. Next slide, please, Chris. So in terms of native species recovery, I've broken it down into three distinct categories here, and this has taken inspiration from Natural England and where they identify threatened species recovery actions. So how things can be implemented on the ground that can help protect species that are most at risk. So the first stage of that is essentially diagnosing the decline, understanding what pressures are facing species and establishing a baseline for that. So reasons for decline for a species may be, again, invasive non-native species, habitat loss and fragmentation, pollution, disease, poor habitat connectivity, and various other reasons that might affect a species. Once you've established what that is, you can then begin to test for solutions and deploying those solutions if successful. So in the case of water vole, a really key factor for their success is the management of American mink and removing them from systems. It might also be habitat creation and restoration, making sure meta populations of water vole can travel from one area to another to begin to breed. In the case of white claw crayfish, it could be biosecurity measures to ensure that crayfish plague isn't entering watercourses, whether or not that be what Ali mentioned, check, clean, dry, and various other biosecurity measures that you can take place there. And finally, it's about sort of sustainable management. So how can you keep those solutions in place for the long term? Obviously, the last thing you want to do is introduce a solution and then have it work, and then unfortunately having to cut it for various reasons. So whether or not that's aligning funding or policy and strategies, or just making sure that you've got community engagement in place to help these solutions take place and happen. Next slide, please, Chris. So I'm going to briefly discuss the Eden water vole project in the slide here, just to sort of summarize it, and then we'll go into depth as the presentation continues. So really the Eden Catchment Water Vole project really did focus on water vole recovery within the Eden catchment. And this was to be achieved through three main vectors, if you like. That's being American mink trapping, improving habitat, and species reintroduction. So bringing this species back into the landscape. Next slide, please, Chris. So for those who don't know, the water vole is a semi-aquatic mammal, and it really was ubiquitous in the United Kingdom. Estimated that there was 8 million individuals in the early 1900s, and they really were an important part of an ecosystem. They were a prey base for a variety of native predators. Their burrowing activities created different bankside conditions and really promoted bankside floral growth. So they were really quite important in the landscape. And there's a quote that there by Reverend McPherson, who in 1892 more or less said that the water rat, aka water vole, was really common in the Lake District and was found, ubiquitously across the landscape. And he cites melanistic water voles being found in the Eden Valley in two instances, which is really interesting. So the first National Water Vole Survey took place in 1989 and 1990, and that identified a 68% decline in water vole population since 1939, which is alarming to say the least. So there were follow-up surveys in 1996 and 97, which then recorded losses from over 90% of those sites previously surveyed. So it identified an issue, and then following surveys really did highlight massive concern. So off the back of those initial national water vole surveys, we've identified that up to 94% estimated reduction in distribution. So where water vole are found between 1900 and 1998, which is very alarming, and still to this day, they are the UK's fastest declining mammal species. Next slide, please, Chris. So now we're going to touch on like the diagnosis for the decline. So I've essentially branched these off into two. So habitat loss and degradation. There's a variety of factors that can influence decline of water voles, be that excess drainage, overgrazing, so removing food sources for water vole, barriers to dispersal. Water voles need, and they exist in something called a tight meta population. So they really are dependent on the ability to move from one population to another to exchange genes. If those barriers are in place, it may lead to interbreeding and then subsequent decline of populations. Extreme flooding events as well can essentially damage burrows. It can force water voles out of their burrow networks, especially in winter when they're very susceptible, which can leave them exposed to predation. And things like droughts are becoming an issue in areas where water levels have essentially dropped, exposed bankside burrows, and have promoted terrestrial predators from entering burrows like stoats and weasels. Whereas obviously if the burrow was underwater, they wouldn't really be able to access that. And what we're really going to be discussing is invasive non-native predators and particularly the American mink, which we'll go into depth now. But in some areas, it is worth mentioning, particularly in urban environments, that domestic cats can be quite problematic to watervole populations. Next slide, please, Chris. So the American mink is a semi-aquatic carnivorous mustelid, so part of the weasel family, native to North America. It was introduced to the UK for fur farming, which is actually a really lucrative business in the 1920s. Very fashionable to have mink pelts for coats and gloves. So they were brought over from North America for that industry. In 1956, they were first found breeding in the wild in Devon. And then little over 10 years later, they were found present and breeding in over half the counties in England and Wales. This was due to either escapees, but later on in the 1990s, animal rights activists began releasing individuals from fur farms. So these releases were often sort of done in the cover of darkness overnight, and it's estimated that upwards of 7,000 individuals could be released in a single night, and that was in Staffordshire, I believe, was that large event that night, which obviously can cause massive detriment to small mammal populations nearby and birds as well. Eventually, all of the lobbying led to the Fur Farming Prohibition Act in 2000, and then the last active mink farm was decommissioned in 2003. So actually, we are talking about relatively recent history here, which I think people find a bit surprising when they realise that, you know, the last farm was actually closed down in 2003. So really fairly recent. Next slide, please, Chris. So why American mink problematic? So they are extremely and surprisingly adaptable. They have a highly varied diet and habitat preferences. They can be found in a variety of habitats. They're not necessarily associated with just riparian systems, although that's where you can generally find them. They're very comfortable on land as they are in water. They can compete with our native carnivores for food, be that polecats and in some cases otters as well. They're extremely powerful swimmers, so they're now found on several Scottish islands from where they've swum from mainland Scotland onto the islands, and where they've unfortunately decimated colonies of seabirds as a result of that. They're naturally voracious as well, which really doesn't help matters at all. A lot of the prey items in the UK exhibit something called prey naivety, so they don't have any anti-predatory behaviors or defense mechanisms for mink predation because they haven't co-evolved. And this is very acutely seen in the case of American mink and water vole. A water vole burrow can't be accessed by sort of many terrestrial predators because they're often found underwater, and they can't be accessed through a lot of sort of underwater burrows by species like fish. Unfortunately, a female American mink can perfectly fit into a water vole burrow, and she'll just hunt in a lineal fashion and unfortunately eat the water vole within their colonies and burrows. American mink have a considerable range, so they can travel up to 50 kilometers in a fortnight in search of breeding pairs, which they'll be doing at this time of year, particularly April time. So males particularly can travel extreme distances, so it really is a bit of a landscape scale issue. And they have no natural predators within the UK apart from man. Next slide, please, Chris. So we're going to talk about a bit of the solution and what's been ongoing, not only in the Ealing catchment, but nationally. So the Water Life Recovery Trust, which is based in East Anglia, developed an extremely effective method for eradicating American mink across large geographical areas. So this was the first study of its kind to be done in England, and attempted at like a large mainland scale effort. A lot of eradication efforts are focused on islands. So this was really sort of a first trial that has been really, really successful now. So they've actually removed American mink from 11% of mainland England now using this methodology, which is essentially core trapping areas are established, and then systematically traps are placed, at least sort of one trap every 18 square kilometers to cover a distance on each waterway. Each trap is fitted with a remote monitoring device. So an individual will enter a trap, and then the remote monitoring device will detect when the trap door shuts, and then that alerts the trapper's phone, telling them that they've caught an individual. The traps are highly species specific. So just below the photograph of a mink carrying a seabird there, you've got a mink raft. So they float on water. The cages are reduced entrance, so species like otter can't enter them. And mink are drawn into a scent lure at the back of the cage. They step on a treadle in the cage. The trap door shuts, and it alerts the operator's phone that they've caught a mink. Um, those individuals are then humanely dispatched, and then we send them for genetic analysis, where we can determine their relationship groups, their genetics, and we can also they undergo dental analysis, so we can actually figure out how old they are. And then this allows us to map them onto a database, so we can figure out where the closest related individuals are found, which is really important for targeting our trapping efforts. Next slide, please, Chris. So the national effort, so there's over 6,000 registered American mink captures in the UK as a result of this project now, and over 4,600 registered mink traps. So in order to have sort of sustained water vole recovery nationally, this has to happen at scale, because obviously mink can travel extreme distances and can leave water vole vulnerable across a landscape. So in order to be successful, trapping needs to be collaborative, comprehensive, and of course, practice the highest of animal welfare standards. Next slide, please, Chris. So in Cumbria, our home patch, we have been trapping with West Cumbria Rivers Trust, Cumbria Wildlife Trust, and the Russell and Watervole Recovery Project. We have great working relationships with those other organisations, and we really rely on the exchange of knowledge between our groups as to what works and what doesn't. Collectively, we've humanely dispatched 350 American mink across 240 mink traps that we've deployed, and we've captured 50 American mink so far in this year alone. So for our project in the Eden, it was calculated that American mink conservatively will eat 1.5 animals a day. So as a result of our direct trapping operations, we would have saved the lives of 156,000 animals as a result of our trapping network that's been running for 3 years now. And I've got a photo of a mink raft just floating in the watercourse there. And underneath that, there's a video link that hopefully should play, showcasing an American mink and its interest in one of the traps. So just on the dangled on that string is a practice golf ball with a scent lure from an American mink in there, and obviously you can see that the individual is very attracted to it. There isn't a cage in this trap. In this raft, sorry, there's just a clay cartridge, so we can tell whether or not a mink's been through there, and we can just see their footprints. So yeah, it's an extremely targeted and strategic approach. So really, ultimately, what we're trying to achieve is water vole recovery, but not only water voles. We want to see ground nesting birds and waders recover from non-native species predation. So as a result, we've reintroduced 750 water voles to the Eden catchment. They're currently breeding and should hopefully disperse from those population sites soon, and hopefully establish new meta populations in areas where we haven't reintroduced them, which is a real sign of success that we've got the habitat conditions right. There's no barriers to disperse when the predation pressure is removed. As a result of our project, we've humanely dispatched 251 American mink, as what I've said previously. They can eat conservatively 1.5 native animals a day, so that should have a really sort of large scale impact on native species recovery. As a result of the project as well, we've created habitat improvement works, from sort of new wetlands to plug planting and riparian fencing to protect bank sides, stop sediment input into waterways as well. And this also conserves water vole burrow networks as well. They're obviously a protected species, and it's an offence to damage a water vole burrow, so we need to make sure that they're protected and not going to be compacted. And we've made this happen just by working and growing with a network of engaged volunteers, varying from conservationists to gamekeepers, farmers, and angling groups and other environmental NGOs, to make this happen at a landscape scale. And hopefully we can see water voles dispersing and being a common sight across the Eden catchment like they once was. Yeah, next slide, please, Chris. And again, this is all thanks to sort of a variety of partners and funders that we work with to make this happen. Say like show some of the organizations on here, but it doesn't sort of account for the thousands of hours of volunteer work that's happened on the ground, and we really wouldn't be able to do work like this without them. Um, so yeah, I think that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I should say thank you very much because you've put a nice picture of a bowl like bear with berries and everything else. So that's grand. We had a few questions, so thank you for your questions. I'll go back to, well, I'll ask one for Stephen first as he's still with us. We were asked where American mink came from, but I think you covered that in your talk, so that's grand. We've been asked about beaver reintroductions. They're proposed at Ennerdale, and we wondered if there was any plans for the Eden catchment for the beavers, Stephen.
I don't have any updates on this currently, so I'm not really too sure if I can answer this one. Yeah, no, I'm not too sure on that.
That's something we can find out about. We can
Yeah,
share that anon. And Ali, we've had a couple of questions on balsam. So someone had walked maybe out of our catchment, I'm not sure. Someone had walked Hadrian's Wall and seen balsam dominating, a long way along the Eden from the west of Carlisle as far as Crosby. So yeah, in our catchment. Do we have plans for more work this year, community-based plans for getting rid of some of this balsam along our rivers?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a lot of balsam, especially up near Carlisle. I think because the way it works is it flows down the catchment, so wherever it's starting up at the top, it's flowing all the way down. But yeah, definitely as part of this Access to Eden project, we'll be organising balsam bashes at our project sites in Carlisle. So even though they're not quite on that Crosby side, they link onto the main Eden, so at Engine Lunning and then at Petrol Vale in Carlisle. So definitely keep an eye out for balsam bashes being advertised from us. But yeah, in terms of the rest of the catchment, I mean, we wouldn't be able to do what we do without community action. So in terms of balsam bashes, yeah, we just want to inspire those communities, get anyone involved that wants to, because we can't do it all ourselves. And the only way we can really get rid of it is to get everyone involved. So community-based action is definitely the way we're going, and we'll have plenty of balsam bashes going on this summer.
One other question, which you answered in text, but everyone won't have seen that. What do you do with the balsam plants when you pull them up? Is there a way of dealing with them and getting rid of them? And can people do it themselves now that we're involving communities?
Definitely. Yeah, great question. This is the fun part. So you can come join us once we've found a site. When we get there, it's illegal to remove any plant material that's classed as an invasive species. So when we arrive at a site, we find a spot close to the balsam where we can pile it up and mash it. And this is away from the river. So if we do get a flood, it doesn't wash away. And we basically throughout the day we bag our balsam, we take it to this pile, we pile it on top, and the fun bit at the end is jumping on the pile, mashing it all up, and turning it into a big balsam paste. And it does mean if any seeds do survive and plants grow, that we can go straight to that pile the next year. And we know that it might come out of there, but we know where to tackle it from. So yeah, that's the fun bit.
Brand. And apparently, well, yeah, a pair of beavers were released at Lowther as part of an enclosed trial in 2021. It had a kit last year, we know that much. No firm plans for any other introductions at the moment. So I think we'll leave the questions and answers there. Thank you for joining us. We will make the recording of today's event available on our website, and we'll send you all a link to everyone that attended today and a link to the other 3 webinars that are running this series. You'll get that. So if you can attend, then that's grand. If not, you'll get a link to recordings. So you can catch up with them in your own time. Next one is 15th of April, Slow the Flow. John Rattray, our head of operations, will be explaining why we're putting wiggles back into our waterways in the Eden catchment and creating buffer strips. So we're on a bit of a mission to restore the natural snake bend and diversity of our waterways. So John will give an excellent explanation about why that work's going on and what the sort of wider benefits of that are going to be. So we're on time, so that's good. Thank you to Ali and Stephen for your talks. They're both excellent. I learned a lot, and I hope you did. Thank you for joining us. We'll stop the share now and look out for your emails. Thank you.